How's it going, everyone? This is Mike, and I'm back for another episode of Genre Files. And this week we all watched a silent movie. Silence. Not a word. Silence. Okay, so I watched a movie that I've had sitting on the shelf for about a year, which I never got around to watching before, and it is The Artist. The Artist, the best picture of 2011. And I just now got around to watching it, and I want you to know that I loved it. It drew me in from the very first moment. I had such a great time watching this movie, and I can't believe I waited so long to actually sit down and watch it. So anyway, I think everybody in the world has seen this except for me, so there's no reason to worry about spoilers. But it's a very simple plot, really. It takes place, begins in the year 1927. It's in black and white. It is a silent movie unto itself, and it's about the silent movies and the difficulties that some people had during the transition to sound in the late 1920s. So, made by a French director named Michel. Let me see if I can butcher this name. Hang on a second. Michel Hazanavicius. How's that? Michel Hazanavicius. We'll just leave it at that. This is why I don't live in France, folks. And the two leading actors are also French. These are a little easier to pronounce. The actor is Jean Dujardin, and the actress is Bérénice Bejo, who also happens to be married to the director. Okay? And I believe the director has a small part in the film as well. Some of the other actors James Cromwell, John Goodman, who is terrific in this movie, Malcolm McDowell has a small part in it. Beth Grant is in it. And who else am I leaving out? Missy Pyle, I believe she's an American. And Penelope Ann Miller. So great cast of actors. Like I said, it's in black and white. It's actually shot in color, but they took the color out afterward. And I believe it was shot on the digital process. I can't speak English either. But yeah, I love this movie. It's a very simple story about an actor who was a huge star in the year 1927 named George Valentine, played by Mr. Dujardin. And he's kind of a John Gilbert type. He kind of sort of looked like John Gilbert in a way. John Gilbert was a major star in the 1920s and had a lot of big trouble making it into sound films because his voice was a little high and squeaky, and it wasn't recorded very well. And his voice did not fit the image that people had of him in silent films. So he had a very difficult time. Anyway, so what happens to this George Valentine? He's a big star, and he meets this young aspiring performer named Peppy Miller, played by Miss Bejo, who was absolutely gorgeous. And they just happen to meet by accident once. She kind of bumps into him when he's doing this photo shoot outside of a theater. And they have their picture taken together. Very famous photograph that goes all over the world. And the caption is, "Who's that girl? Who's the girl with George Valentine?" So that gets her a lot of attention. And she shows up later at the studio, which is Kinograph Studios, headed by John Goodman. I think is he the head of the studio or the director? I've already forgotten, but John Goodman is a bigwig at the studio. And she auditions as a dancer, and Valentine sees her and he remembers her, and he gives, let her into the film. Give her a chance. So that's how it all begins. Her star begins to rise, and also during the period 1927, 1929, which is when sound films were first starting to be made, and they weren't being made very well, and a lot of them were pretty bad. And all the studios were struggling to find a way to all of a sudden record sound. Well, George Valentine thinks sound films are a fad that will just disappear, that nobody's going to like them. So by 1929, the studio decides that they will not make any more silent movies because now everybody wants to see and hear talking pictures. And George Valentine has a nightmare where he's living perfectly happy in a completely silent world, and all of a sudden sound starts to appear. It's a beautifully done nightmare sequence where it all begins with the sound of a glass being set down on his dresser, and he hears sound for the first time, as does the audience watching this movie. That's the first sound we hear, and except for the music, of course, in the background. But he starts to hear more and more sound, and the whole world is filled with sound, and the sound of people's voices. Everyone except for him. He has no voice. And the fear is that he will not have a voice that will be accepted by people when they hear it in a talking picture. And so he's just filled with great fear. He's afraid of making a talking picture. So he leaves the studio and he puts all of his own money into making another silent film in 1929. And if the movie is a success, then he'll do okay. But if it's a flop, then he's lost everything. Well, the movie premieres on the same day or the same night as Peppy Miller, who has been slowly getting bigger and bigger parts in Hollywood and becoming more of a popular actress. Peppy Miller has made a film that is premiering on this night. It's a major, major success. His film at the theater right next door is a major, major flop. It also happens to be the same day as the stock market crash of 1929, so he's lost everything. He's ruined financially, and he believes he's ruined professionally, so he just goes into this terrible decline and depression, and his life just falls apart. He has to sell everything. So he goes through a couple of years of very, very bad drama. But Peppy Miller, and he also loses his wife too. He has a marriage that's not very happy anyway, but he loses his wife and he's all alone, living with a chauffeur played by James Cromwell, and also his beautiful little dog, which had appeared with him in a lot of his movies, and the dog is one of the best things in the film. Anyway, so a couple of years down the road, Peppy Miller, who has always had a very special place in her heart for George Valentine, she finds a way to help him, and she encourages him to make a musical. So that's what they do. At the end of the movie, they're doing this terrific dance scene, and at the end of it, and the cameraman says cut, or the director says cut, and all of a sudden you can hear everybody's voices, and you can hear for the first time the voice of George Valentine, and you hear that he has a French accent, and it's just beautifully done. It's one of those moments in films where I don't think even the most skeptical human being alive wouldn't be sitting there, smiling and just kind of, cheering on these two wonderful people who are doing this great thing together. And it's just, anyway, I love it. I absolutely love it. It's beautifully shot, beautifully designed. It's a great tribute to old Hollywood and the kind of movies they made back in the 1920s. And it really did make me think of John Gilbert a lot. It made me kind of sad in a way, because he was a very, just one of the negative things about old Hollywood, where he could not make it in talking pictures. And it's kind of a parallel here, because there was an actress who had become a star who remembered him and tried to give him another chance and bring him back into films. And the same thing happened with John Gilbert and his former co-star and lover, Greta Garbo, who of course made it into talking pictures beautifully and was a bigger star even in talking pictures than she had been in silence. And she made a film in 1933 called Queen Christina, one of her biggest hits, and she insisted that John Gilbert be given the chance to be her co-star, and he did a very, very good job. Even so, it didn't conquer all of his demons and all of his problems and drinking and self-doubt, and he never got another good picture, anything as good as Queen Christina after that. So he only lived a few more years, and he died very young. I think he was only 37 or 38 when he died. It was very, very sad. But this kind of, this kind of redeems the ghost of John Gilbert. Great actors. I mean, this guy did win Best Actor of that year, and I think she was nominated as well. She's wonderful. So hopefully we'll see a lot more of these people, and maybe this will be a jump start to making more black and white films and silent films. I don't really know if that'll happen, but it would be nice. It gives me hope in a way that people could. It surprises me, really, that so many people would love this movie as much as they did, and would it be such a big hit all over the world, especially in this country. But yeah, it gives me hope for the future. So, The Artist, Genre Files. Okay, comments are welcome. I am out of here.